Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bet365 Stadium. You can see it in all its wonderful glory behind me. This is, without doubt, one of the coldest grounds in England. I won't go into it too much than that, but this stand that we're stood in is completely exposed by a big old gap, and that's all connected. So the wind does come through, and it does feel cold here, and that makes for probably a tougher afternoon from a Norwich City perspective. Norwich City have drawn here this afternoon, 1-1 with Stoke. Which is on the surface, and that's where we'll look at it for now, is a good point. I think any point you take on the road in the Championship is one that is typically hard fought and typically pretty good on the surface. Dig deeper, and I feel like we're probably going to end this video talking about a lot of the same issues, problems, questions around where this Norwich City group is at. Let's start at the beginning, which was, after what happened and unfolded at Carrow Road last weekend, the disappointment of that Wrexham defeat. Liam Manning pledged changes, he promised changes, and that's what Norwich City, or that's what his team selection delivered. 5 of them, in fact, with a change of shape as well, an extra man in midfield. It was more of a 4-2-3-1, but again changed and was there were variations of throughout the game. But certainly if we're kind of talking base formation and just to make it, I guess, dissectable, that's kind of where it was. To begin with, Fisher reinstated at left back, which I think was the right choice. Otherwise, the same back three. McLean reinstated. Liam Gibbs brought in. Makama brought in. Schwartau brought in. Those were the 5 changes. And it felt probably from the off like a team that was geared much more towards energy and being quite compact in a shape. And I think at the very low level of everything that we are going to discuss, this was a Norwich City team that did contain grit and fight and had that sort of resolute edge that they didn't have last weekend. But again, we're talking about aspects that should always be contained within a performance. So I'm always a bit loath to kind of credit those, but they were there, and it's worth acknowledging. And the first half, I thought Norwich City started really poorly, if I'm honest. The first 10, 15 minutes where struggled with possession. Stoke got on top, immediately assumed control of the game. Probably quite unfortunate not to have slipped Mabama in behind, which was kind of the aim, really. They were trying to almost drag Norwich City centre-backs away and slip a ball in behind them for Mwamba to run onto. Million Manhurth, again, a constant threat on the right. Sorba Thomas, who eventually did get the goal after half-time. Very, very good as well. But Norwich, for the most part, the game plan was set, really. They were sat in a low to mid block. It was about trying to meet the ball, trying to be aggressive and hold their shape organisationally. And then if they did break, could they go and counter? Could they go and threaten in transition? And there were moments where they did that, and probably none better really than for the goal. Where again, we're going to come on to a lot of the possession stuff, but this was a real moment where they did have that quality in possession, and it comes from it's quite a nice move actually. Norwich recycled the ball to Palamatz, and Jack Stacey's on his bike, and I thought in that first half he read those moments in terms of when to go, when not to go really well. Considering he was up against again Sorba Thomas for the majority of this contest. He gets in behind. I was almost looking, and you're almost waiting for the ball to be cut back to Josh Sargent, who felt like the obvious choice, but it's a brilliant ball from Jack Stacey across the 6-yard box for Jovan Makama to bundle into the back of the net, really. His second Norwich City goal. And I think for everything we are going to talk about, it was his physicality and power that Norwich tried to play off all afternoon. It was about trying to hit direct balls into him and play off seconds, or it was about using his power and Sargent's power in transition. And again, the way Norwich's shape changed when they were in possession, McLean almost dropped in as a left-sided centre-back. Gibbs would then drop in. The 2 fullbacks would push high, and it was almost a box they created in and around Sargent, who again looks pretty isolated. But those moments on the ball were few and far between. And they got into the break leading. I actually felt after the goal, probably more a reflection of Stoke, but I think some of the wind went out of their sails and Norwich began to look a bit more comfortable. And then similarly to last week, 48 minutes on the clock? I think it's a minute later than they conceded with Josh Windass on the score sheet at Carrow Road last week. Stoke were level again, and it was a shot that got blocked into the path of Sorba Thomas, who on the turn smashes it into the back of the net. And I think from there, probably looking around in the press box and at each other, and I'm sure the fans were doing that in the away end, going, oh, goodness me, here we go again. And you could visibly see Norwich trying to break the game up. But from there, it just regressed into them being in a block, really. Stoke hit the post. Kovacevic made a couple of good saves. That's in the first half as well, where Jakov Medic cleared the ball off the line after Junho was played through and got the final touch after Kovacevic did well. Kovacevic had to make a flurry of really good saves. It wasn't quite Coventry levels, but Norwich still conceded 23 shots on their goal. They were dominated really from start to finish of this game. Million Manhurst cuts inside, slides the ball down a channel of Norwich defenders, and that comes off the post. And they had real opportunities to win this game. And I've just listened to Mark Robins' post-match press conference and agree entirely. I thought Stoke were the team that deserved to win this game, should have won this game. And I think it's one of those games where if you play it 10 times, 7, 8 times, we're stood here talking about Stoke win rather than the point that Norwich City have been able to cling on to. And it's a lot of suffering that Norwich are having to do at the moment, and that Norwich fans are having to do at the moment, because there's just not a lot to hold on to in terms of the way that they play, their approach to games, the manner that they play in possession. But I think also the profile of the squad as well is a real absence of creativity, a real absence of spark, and variation as well, I think, in terms of how they play. And that means that their possession becomes hurried, and it becomes disconnected, and it's just unable for long spells of this game to keep hold of the football and to use it in a way that was going to get them up the pitch and be progressive with it. And in the end, if you can't do that, you're going to have to spend so much of the game in a deep block or a mid to low block, soaking up pressure, heading balls from your box, blocking, defending. And again, really, Harry Darling and Jakov Medic did that on the whole pretty well, with some scares. I thought, again, Callum Fisher, particularly in the first half, handled Million Manhurst, who's been so well. I thought he defended against him really well today. And as I say, I thought Jack Stacey, in terms of springing Norwich into transition, was good as well. So, yeah, it's just sufferable, really. I think if I had to describe the way Norwich City are playing at the moment, it's a lot of suffering, a lot of sitting in block, and it's the sustainability of it I worry about, to be honest. The fact that really across the last 3 games, Coventry, Wrexham today, probably the spell after Norwich's goal, where again, as I said, I think that was more to do with what Stoke didn't do and some of the momentum that they lost, rather than what Norwich City did. But it's probably the best spell they've had in the last 3 games. It's 1 win in 6 now, I think, for Norwich, if I'm correct. And yeah, this was just so lacking in intent and positivity and energy and purpose as well to their play. And it's a team at the moment that looks, I try not to say these things flippantly, but it looks a lot closer to a bottom 6 team than it does a top 6 team. And again, we're very early stage of the season. I always give those caveats. And it's a difficult dilemma at the moment, because every time I think Leo Manning speaks, he's pretty open in terms of this isn't what he wants. It's not close to where he wants. The performances aren't there. But equally, there's just not a lot of improvement. I'm seeing a team at the moment who, pragmatism, I think, there's always a criticism of pragmatism, that you don't really have an ideology and that you don't really have an identity. There's nothing really, you can struggle with substance behind it, but there's typically a purpose to it. The way Norwich are playing at the moment there's not really any purpose to the way they're playing beyond kind of long balls forward into Jova and Makama. Josh Sargent's so isolated, it's untrue. I haven't looked at the stats and the data yet, but I'd bet my house that he had very, very few touches this afternoon. The only, it was 2 shots, one in either half, really. One where he got slid in by Makama in one of those better transitional moments, and then the second half again, I can't remember who slid him into the right hand side, but it was Antti Sinats actually, and Johansson was out of his goal quickly. And I'm not naive. I know when you come to places like Stoke and Coventry, they're difficult places to come in the Championship. You are going to have to endure a little bit of pain and soak up a bit of pressure. The problem is the theme over the run of games. It's the way Norwich are playing. It's the lack of purpose beyond that Sargent chance that I mentioned, and one that Liam Gibbs had from an impossible angle that I think hit a combination of the keeper and the bar. Norwich had very, very little, let alone kind of purpose in the final third. They had very little purpose in Stoke's half, to be honest. And that's the difficulty. They're a tough watch. They're clinging on for dear life. It's like watching a boxer who's constantly on the ropes, and they've got their hands up here and they're having to defend, and they're just kind of trying to resort to letting their opponent punch them in the body without maybe landing that knockout blow, without really any conviction. It feels a lot like survival at the moment, and that for a team who have spent the money that Norwich have, we can't ignore that. And what was it, 40 million probably over the course of 2 summers. Their bench today cost 24.1 million pounds, I think, when you add up all of the transfer fees that they spent. And Mate Jurasek didn't even get on the pitch today. Antti Sinats came on for Makama and looked a lot less effective. Let's be honest, it feels like a group that is just really struggling to feel their way into the season. Now, of course, Norwich are 7, 8 games into this campaign, a couple of League Cup games on top, and so the difficulty they have is probably inevitably, when you churn the squad to the extent they have, and the coaching team as well, it's difficult to see how that translates into a win now feeling, and that of course with the expectation and really everything that they've done since getting rid of Johannes Hoftorp since Easter has been about being geared up to be instant and to win now, and that you question probably a little bit what they spent last season trying to build, because this is so far removed from it. When you think about the very there were really good aspects of a Johannes Hoftorp team, and there was not so good aspects, and that's the same for every team. But the one aspect they were really good at was possession, and they kept the ball and they were comfortable handling the ball, were beating tight areas. We can argue all day long about the purpose of that, the success of that, but they could take the ball in tight spaces. They were comfortable. They could find a teammate. And this year we're not seeing that, and that at a very basic level is, I think, what is frustrating people. And that's kind of the point, I think, in terms of, I think Norwich fans probably could stomach what they were seeing if there was a little bit more of performance and a little bit more substance behind it, even in bursts. We're not really seeing anything in bursts at the moment. It's just, a lot of suffering on and off the pitch. And, for a group of strangers, that's always going to be difficult to try and form that and build that quickly to a position where you can win games in the Championship, particularly on the road, with a certain way. So the positive is the fact that they're coming away from home and not losing and picking up points. But the reality is, this Coventry game and the Stoke game, you look at the numbers, you look at the sustainability of their performance, and it's just not there. And that is ultimately why they are getting the results at home that they are. And people have asked me kind of what's the difference between the home form and the away form. And in truth, there's not a lot. Norwich are performing quite similar away from home and at home. The reality is that they're probably riding their luck a little bit more. They're probably defending a little bit better here because, again, there's more impetus on them to be higher up the pitch and to be the protagonists at Carrow Road. Whereas away, they can almost sit in a block and try and make life difficult. And I think Coventry and Stoke have missed some really good chances within that. So, again, is it a playing style point? Is it a squad profile point? Is this squad just so devoid of creativity and quality in certain areas that they're unable to deliver some of those aspects in possession? Is it a coaching point? Is it a team that is failing to enact and implement the ideas and styles of its head coach? Is it a combination of everything? Probably. That tends to be what it is, because you see for the first goal, in terms of the way that Norwich drafted that, Maatson with a lovely threaded ball through to Stacey, a brilliant ball across. They can do it. It is there. There is quality in this group, but not collective quality so far. That's probably been the best goal they've scored this season in terms of style. And the reality is they've not really looked like doing it before or after, and that almost feels like it's kind of the outlier to the way they're playing. And the reality is, if you can't keep the ball, if you can't find a way to progress up the pitch, and that means that Norwich are having to resort into kind of marginal balls and percentages, and then clinging on for dear life, which they were at the end of this game as well. And if Stoke had probably that little bit more quality, that final, capability just to put this game to bed, they would have done, because it's not just the chances that they had, it's the control as well that they had of this game. Really from the off, barring a little spell from Norwich's goal to half-time, this was a game that Stoke dominated, and that is incredibly frustrating and hard to accept, I guess, from the Norwich fans who, again, and this is the point really, it comes back to, they haven't set or imposed the expectations on this group. They have been set. There's been so much talk of playoffs, and it's a group and a club that has become so blinded by the outcome. It's kind of forgotten how to do the process, it feels like a little bit to me. And probably a natural part of this process is the pain and the suffering and taking the punches. But getting out of that is difficult to break, because you lose confidence, you lose momentum, you lose that ability to do anything but run and to be a little bit energetic and fight. And that's kind of all we've got to praise them for. So have my concerns from last week gone away? No. It's a good point on the surface, but again, there's so much underneath that needs to be fixed about this group, and it's about whether they have the ingredients to do that, and that is a baffling thing to say after the money they've spent. So ultimately, that is where the light is going to be shone on the sporting director, Ben Napper, and probably their work in terms of recruitment, because I think barring Vladan Kovacevic and Harry Darling, the jury's out on a lot of them. I mean, today there were 5 players in that starting lineup, I think, in terms of Callum Fisher, Jack Stacey, Kenny McLean, Josh Sargent, Liam Gibbs. So 5 players in that 11 that were bought by the previous sporting director, Stuart Webber, and in that era. And yet they are the ones that are being kind of pushed forward as maybe the ones that are in a best place for Norwich City to, get a result and to be a little bit more resolute. And that ultimately will always come back on recruitment. Like I say, they had a bench today of £24 million, which is far in excess of Stoke, is far in excess of most Championship teams. They had a team last week that was worth £39.5 million. So again, is this a group that's been poorly assembled and poorly recruited, or is it a coaching point? And again, the reality is there's always scales to these things, but it's probably both of those in truth. And it feels easy probably to stand here and say, well, this gets fixed with time, but there's no guarantee of that. Often we say that, but actually teams don't get better over the course of a season. A lot of the time they kind of stay as are, and there are minor tweaks or minor boosts that you can give them. So yeah, it's not a good place that Norwich are in at the moment. And the thing, I guess, is that Liam Manning acknowledges that he's not standing there and saying this is what I want this Norwich City team to look like. But of course, saying that and recognising the flaws of a team and then fixing them are two very different things. And I recognise that as well. And there were chants from that away end of Manning sort it out for balance. There were chants to the contrary, and there was the Super Liam Manning chant as well. So yeah, it's conflicted, but again, it's not the way that Norwich wanted to start a week that feels very big in terms of the mood, in terms of probably the judgment as well of some of those guys that are at the top of the club and some of the work that's gone on, because of course everything is hurtling now towards next Sunday and that East Anglian derby. And I have to say, you look at the way Norwich have performed in the opening games of this season, you really fear for them heading there. And of course, in the meantime as well, whilst you kind of look a lot, and it's not long, it's 2 games, but you look a little bit longer to that game. But there's a game in midweek at Carrow Road against West Brom, which is not going to be easy as well. West Brom, a team who have been comfortable with the ball, who have been, got a good point away to Leicester. And, again, you look at the way this has kind of been sold in terms of the recruitment that Norwich have done. They've signed players, not who are 20, 21, 22 like they did last summer, with a view to, right, okay, this is going to take time, it's going to look messy, and then we build it up. They bought players who are in the primes of their careers, who should be ready to step in and help it. And this is why this whole thing feels just so muddled at the moment, and why what they're doing and their operations and the plan. I say it again, you spend a year building last season just to kind of ditch it at Easter. What were they building towards? What are they building for? Because they've changed the head coach, they've changed a lot of the squad. And yeah, like I said at the top, really, it feels like a group that's probably at the moment closer to the bottom 6 in terms of where it's performing, to probably where it wants to be and where the talk has been in terms of top 6. And if they cannot break this cycle of performances, it's going to build pressure constantly, irrespective of coming away and getting a point to places. So that's where I am. Hopefully that was coherent and made sense. But this was another disappointing performance from Norwich City. And yeah, those fans deserve better. So that's the frustration, I think, for me. It's a little bit of everything, and it needs to change quick. And we just need to get some smiles back on faces in terms of the fan base. And these next 2 games feel seismic to doing that, I guess. Particularly, obviously, that one next Sunday at Portland Road, where I suspect where Norwich City stand after that game will dictate a lot of the mood, I guess. So yeah, there we go. From the Bet365 Stadium, thank you very much for watching. Pinkin.com, of course, the place to go. All the analysis, reaction. You can watch Liam Manning's verdict as well very shortly. And we will see you at Carrow Road in midweek for that trip of West Brom. See you soon.